Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Alicia and I'm the owner of Alicia Be Creative. Today's tutorial, we are going right into Valentine's Day with this super cute cartoon style tumbler featuring this Betty Boop decal that you can now find on my website. So of course I'll list all the supplies down in the description box down below, but let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with prepping our tumbler. So this is a true 32 ounce handled mug from the Tipsy Magnolia. I will have a link down in the description box to their website. And so I decided that first off, the one thing I absolutely love about a Tipsy Magnolia cup is the fact that you can pop out the bottom and do like a glitter butt, a shaker butt. Like there's so many fun things that you can do with these. So I love to pop out the bottom. So I'm just using this tool that I found in my husband's toolbox. Couldn't tell you what it is. It's some sort of scissor plier thing to kind of pry out that bottom section. You can use a flathead like screwdriver as well. That will work to grab that bottom out. Something to just wedge in there to get that bottom plate out. Then we'll go ahead and sand the surface with an 80 grit sanding block to scratch up that surface and remove that shine. And then we're going to go ahead and of course spray paint this. So I'm using a new spray paint. It's called Cheers. I found this when I was at Michael's and it is like a metallic, like light champagne gold color, and I'm really loving this color. I grabbed a bunch of the metallic spray paints when I was at Michael last, and so you're probably going to see a lot of these because I just love the colors that I was able to find that I haven't seen when I'm usually purchasing my Color Shot spray paints. So now we're going to go ahead and lay out our stencils. So I just went into Cricut Design Space. I didn't show you that work because I just used the shape feature, the heart in the shapes feature in Cricut, and the middle heart here is like 3.5 inches, and then the largest hearts down at the bottom is 1.5, and then the other ones are I think 1 inch and then 0.75 inches. So I just did a few of those so that I had some of these like hearts around the bottom in different sizes. And so we're just going to place those around the bottom portion of the cup because the top portion is where we're going to be doing all of our sort of cartoony drip work at the top. So now with these all applied, we can go ahead and move on to the next step in the process. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm kind of just like evolving this cup as I go. I did sketch this design out, but what I do love about when I sketch things out is, although I think I have a clear vision, I do tend to twist things and shake things up a little bit and do things a little bit differently for the sake of what's going to be the easiest thing to do, what makes the most sense in my head on how to layer things. I know there's going to be a glitter element, but I also know I want a lot of this beautiful spray paint to show. So I'm always kind of like, you know, picking and choosing what step to work on next based on what I feel like makes the most sense in that moment. So I'm going to take my Posca paint pens and I'm going to take red, pink, and blue. And on the bottom here with all of those like small and large hearts, I'm going to outline all of the stencil work. So the majority of the bottom part of this cup is going to remain this like champagne gold metallic spray paint color. So we, though, are still going to have some glitter happening down here. And so to kind of contain the glitter, we're using the stencils to help us keep those perfect heart shapes. And then I'm just tracing that so that when I remove these, I'll easily be able to find where the line work, of course, is and be able to paint in that section and then glitter accordingly. So I'm swapping in between the blue, pink, and the red, just making sure I don't have any of the same colors touching up against each other or right next to one another. That way I have kind of an even mix of all three of these colors down here. So now that we've got that done, we'll take this and we'll just let this dry. These paint pens, of course, like literally dry in no time, a couple minutes, and it's completely dry. So I don't have to worry about dragging any of that paint or marker or smudging that as I'm working through my process. So now we're going to work on the bigger portion, which is going to be the drip at the top. We're going to freehand this drip. Now, if you are someone who would prefer to use like an SVG of a drip, you certainly could. I found that I was going to get a better look if I did this free-handed, but you could have done exactly what I did sort of with the stencils down below, is like cut out a stencil and use that as like the bottom portion of your drip, and then just colored, obviously, remove that stencil and colored everything below it or above it. However that kind of works out or shakes out, if that makes sense. But I'm going to do this freehand. So I'm just taking my time. I'm doing some longer drips, some shorter drips, some barely there kind of squiggles until we get to the other side. I'm making the top drip pretty deep, and I'm going to do the same with the blue drip that we're going to do right under this to kind of keep a really large section of the strip present. Because this is such a big cup, I do want to make sure that the design really is taking up the entirety of the cup, because nothing's worse than having such a big cup to have all of this space to be able to work on, and then like have like everything either look super squished up and squunched together, or have things like too spaced out that it just looks like not enough is happening on the cup. So I wanted to make sure that everything kind of just was evenly distributed across the length of this cup. So now after we've gotten our stenciling or our freehand drawn, we're going to go ahead and just color this all in with the Posca paint pen. Should you choose to, you could also paint these sections. I found that it was a little bit easier for myself, dexterity wise, to be able to just color it in with the paint markers versus trying to use a paintbrush and color in those sections, especially because we're going to be using a paintbrush when we need to add our glue to then add our glitter. So just taking our time to color in all of these sections. That did take a little bit of time, but again, this dries super quick, so I don't really feel like I need to wait in between sections before going into my red section and coloring that in as well. So same thing here, we're going to do exactly what we did with the blue. We're just going to go back around and we're going to color in that same section with the red Posca paint pen. And this is just going to give us a beautiful base color. It's going to really help our glitter color be super vibrant on top of this colored base to match versus trying to do it over that champagne gold spray paint. Again, you totally could use paint if you wanted to, or you could totally, again, use an SVG drip and just do it in the color vinyl that you want to glitter it. And then you could just do it that way too. So that would also be something that's a little bit easier. Again, a lot of the times I don't always necessarily do things the easiest way, but I do it what makes the most sense for me in that moment. For me, it's too much work to have to go and fight with Cricut to cut something out for me. So I would rather just color it in myself, if I'm being completely honest. So before we get into the glittering, I decided that I wanted to address the handle first. I wanted the handle to be a little bit different, stand out a little bit. And so we're going to go ahead and add some tacket to this handle, and then we'll add some gold foil flakes to it to really just make it stand out. I didn't want to glitter it because I was nervous that adding glitter to the handle would be difficult to spray seal. I always find that if I end up with any like specks of stray glitter when I'm epoxying, it always tends to come from the handle than it does from like the base of the cup. And I think it's just because, you know, that's kind of a difficult area to be able to really ensure your spray sealing without it like dripping all over the cup, if that makes sense. So I decided we're just going to go with gold foil flake. It'll be a really pretty way for this to like really stand out. And I think it does complement the overall design pretty well. It's kind of like real stand out and different, but it also, I feel like, matches because we have that champagne gold look of the entirety of the cup. So I'm just going to take these gold foil flake pieces, take my time here and apply them to the handle. Again, we have tacket on the handle, so this is sticking really easily and really well to the handle. Then once I've got the entire handle covered, there is no free or open space or any spray paint exposed. I'm going to take a brush and just brush off any of that excess gold foil flake. And then you'll see me go around with my hand and just kind of smooth or burnish down and rub down all of those foil flakes that might be sticking up, and removing any of that excess that is not in fact stuck to the tacket that is applied to the handle. So I wanted to make sure I had a nice smooth looking handle, smooth to the touch handle, making sure that none of that extra foil flake is sticking up or poking out anywhere, so that we have a really easy time when it comes to the epoxying process. Now with our handle finished, we can go back to our main cup, sort of the main show here, and we're going to get into the glittering section. So this definitely took the most time, of course, to glitter this. This is a super large section of cup to glitter, and I'm using a smaller paintbrush because we have to really get into those smaller, more intricate areas. So using a big paintbrush would really kind of be a hindrance to me. So using a smaller paintbrush, although it is helpful in getting those smaller areas, it takes a little bit longer, of course, to get that paint all the way across the entirety of those sections. The glitter though that we're using for the red section, this is called Gore. It's from Batty Glitter. And so that is the glitter that we're using for the red. It's got a beautiful holographic shift too in this red, which is super pretty. And I feel like is just totally on par for a Valentine's Day cup. So we're going to continue gluing and glittering this in sections, just kind of working section by section to ensure that we are getting really good coverage and that we're not missing any of those intricate drip sections too, taking my time around those areas to ensure that we are fully covering those in glitter and that we're not leaving any of that just painted section exposed or behind. So final glitter section for the red here before we go ahead and move on to the blue. So what I love about designs like this is all of your work is going to be done in this, like in the beginning. Like there isn't a whole lot of work that I need to do after this other than adding some final detail work and the decal. But I love cups like this where you're doing all of the work in sort of the forefront of the design so you can really see and appreciate how the design is coming together before it's completely finished. Sometimes when there's like multiple steps, although all of those cups do come up beautifully, do not get me wrong, you know, sometimes for me at least, I do find that sometimes I will lose my vision for the cup because, you know, there's so many steps that I need to get to and I can't get to it all when I'm inspired to do it because I have to do it in subsequent pieces afterwards. So I do love and tend to appreciate cups like this where the entire design is done sort of in the forefront because I really can appreciate seeing my design from paper come to life directly in front of me. So the glitter we're using for the blue part of the part of the drip, excuse me, is called Glass Slipper. This is also from Batty Glitter. It's a beautiful sort of shifty, sparkly blue here. And once we're done with the drip section here, we're going to go and we're going to do the exact same process with these small hearts. The first thing though that I'm going to do after removing these, I'm not really sure why I waited till after I glittered the first two sections to then remove these and then paint them in glitter. I don't know, but there was a method to my madness at the time, apparently. I just couldn't tell you what that is now. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of backtrack here a bit because I need to go in and I need to color in all of these stenciled areas that are the heart shapes, okay? So if I was really good at drawing a heart, I would have just freehanded all these hearts. But if you were to see the hearts that I draw freehand, you would think that a 3-year-old drew them. So it was just easier for me to use stencils. So I just went through and removed those stencils and then colored those in with the Posca paint pens. And now we're back to adding the glitter. So taking again that smaller paintbrush, taking my time here and ensuring that I fully cover the heart shape and then going in with that glitter. So we're using Glass Slipper again for those blue hearts. For the red, we're going to go back and use Gore. And then for pink, which I haven't showed you that pink yet, but we're actually using Charmed from Batty Glitter as well. I threw the pink in there because I felt like I wanted to break up some of the red and blue. So the Betty Boop decal, which you guys saw when I showed the final results in the beginning of the cup, has, red for her dress, and of course her eyes are like a beautiful blue. And so I wanted to throw in though another color just to kind of break up kind of the monotony of just having the two colors. I just love like having 3 colors together. I just feel like that really kind of brings things out really well versus just having 2, because it can almost be very monotone when you just have 2 colors. At least that's how I view things like that. So I felt like I needed to add another color in there to kind of spice it up a little bit. So we're going to do now the final piece of glittering here. And so I just went around with the pink paint marker and I've traced the bottom portion of that heart, and now we're going to go in and we will color this in. So the reason I didn't remove this heart originally when I was doing the drip is because I knew that removing that and having this painted already would really have made it more difficult for me to paint around those sections where the heart is kind of on top of the drip, if that makes any kind of sense. So I knew that this needed to be the last thing that I did, which is why I didn't color or paint this section until the final piece. So again, we're going in with Charmed as our color, our glitter color for pink here on the cup here. So that is the final thing that I'm going to do. I will let this sit fully dry, of course, and then I spray sealed this until my little heart was content. So I brushed off the entire cup over the trash can, just any stray glitters, of course, really made sure it was brushed off really well before I went in with my first kind of spray sealing. And then I did the same process again. I took the cup over to the trash, again, brushed off really aggressively with my chip brush any kind of stray glitters that are just not sticking before I did my second and final seal, and then waited for that to fully dry before going into our coats of epoxy, okay? So here now in the epoxying process, I'm using 30 mLs of Artist Cure epoxy for this cup. I was going to use Facet and had realized that that was not the bottle that I had warmed up when I was preparing to epoxy. So it didn't hurt to use Artist Cure. Obviously, Fast Cure just ensures you get the project done a little bit quicker. But time was on my side this week, so all was well, me using the Artist Cure. It takes a little bit longer to dry, but the glass-like finish is completely worth it. So we are adding 30 mLs of epoxy to this, and I'm really taking my time here to ensure that this is fully coated. You're even going to see that I am going over the bottom and things to ensure that even the bottom edge is completely covered in epoxy, because we are, after we even do the glitter butt, we are going to epoxy over that bottom as well completely, so the entire cup is sealed, okay? So now this only has one coat of epoxy. This was fully covered, and there was not a reason for me that I could foresee to do another coat of epoxy, because we're only adding one decal, and I was pretty confident that this was not going to pull up this coat of epoxy, which sometimes is the worry when you go in too soon with a decal, being that this only has one coat of epoxy. But honestly, it was thick enough, that 30 mLs over this cup, that I was fully confident that I'm not going to have any issues applying this decal. So we're going to use this cute little Betty Boop decal. I just cut the corner part off to kind of help use that anchoring or hinge method that I like to do with decals, so that I could place this directly over the heart. It just so happens that the size of the heart that I randomly cut out to be the center of this decal is literally a perfect match to the size of the heart Betty Boop decal. I did not do that on purpose. That was 1,000% on accident. I actually thought that maybe the Betty Boop decal would sit kind of inside the pink heart and there would be like a pink outline, but it actually fit perfectly, and it was almost like I did this on purpose when I promise you I did not. Just happened to work out that way. So now that we've gotten our main decal on, now it's time to do sort of our cartoonish look for this cup, okay? So to do sort of this look, I'm sure there is like a name for this technique, and I couldn't tell you because I don't live in that part of the creative artistic world. I am a glitter epoxy girl. I don't do a whole lot of drawing and things of that nature, but this is kind of like a pop art cartoon technique where you do like the harsh black outline and then use other colors as highlights. So we're using the harsh black outline, sort of like in a pop art kind of look, to outline the drips. We'll also do that with all of the hearts at the bottom as well, because we really want this to kind of look, we want it to look fake. I don't know how to describe it. We want it to look more like a cartoon and not like a perfect drip, if that makes sense. We really want to bring out the cartoon vibes, which I feel like just goes so well with a Betty Boop themed Valentine's cup, because, you know, that was what that was, a very old style, like cartoony show, you know? So after we've outlined all of the hearts and all of the drip with the black Posca paint pen, I'm then going to go in with the white, and I'm just making some highlights. And so I'm doing this along all of the dripped areas, and you'll see me, I'll even do this around the hearts as well. But what I'm doing here is, it's the same thing that I would do when I'm creating detailing and adding detailing to any of the designs that I draw in Procreate. It just helps kind of make the image stand out more. So I'm just doing kind of little curved lines and dots that kind of follow along where the black goes, but doesn't sit on top of it. It kind of sits in the colored area, just to kind of bring attention to it. Kind of like, you know, and again, it's not like a perfect highlight like you would get from like the light shining in on something, but it's meant to kind of mimic that, but in more of a fun cartoony style way. So I hope that makes sense. Obviously, I think that you can see kind of how it's sort of making everything stand out a little bit more, because of course the black outline really brings focus to it, but then when you add that white highlight, it really just kind of makes everything pop so much more. So we're going to do the same thing down on all of the hearts at the bottom. And then this was kind of it for like the detailing piece on those pieces. The very final thing we're going to do with our Posca paint pens is I wanted to make this a little bit more cartoony, and we're actually going to add like some, you know, drips as if there is like glitter or the ink is dripping off of the actual edges of the drips, if that makes sense. I just thought that would be a little bit fun to kind of, again, play into the cartoony vibes that I'm going for this cup. So we're going to do that with the red, and we'll do that with the blue. I don't really have a rhyme or reason here, like where I'm putting these. I'm doing kind of not very big teardrop style drops that we're drawing in here, but enough that it would make sense. So just to your heart's content, basically, is what I'm saying here. We'll let this dry for just a couple minutes because, again, this does not take long for this to dry. And then to follow this up, we're going to do exactly what we did with the rest of the cup. We'll go in with the black paint marker first, and that's going to help us outline all of those sort of drips or drops there. And then after we outline all of those in the black, we'll go back in with a white marker and add those highlights. Though when I did add the highlights in white, I did go in with a smaller white paint pen because the larger ones that I have is just too thick for how small I made those kind of teardrop drips that we have going on here. So I did use the smaller of the white paint pens, Posca paint pens that I have. And I will link the paint pens, the Posca paint pens that I have. You can find them on Amazon. I think I bought my set from Michaels, but I'll link them from Amazon because they're a little bit easier to find on Amazon than on the Michaels website. But I will link those, of course, down in the description box. Now, Posca paint pens are a bit pricier, okay, than some other paint pens. However, if you have ever used a Posca paint pen, you will never be able to go back to the other ones. I will tell you that much. I don't know what Posca puts in their paint pens, acrylic paint pens, but they're next level, which is probably why you get exactly what you pay for. You will not be disappointed. So that I will say, okay? So then I just went in with those highlights, and that was kind of all we needed to do. So before I go on to add like a final coats, I should say, of epoxy to this cup, we're going to go ahead and address the butt here. We can't leave this with a bare butt. That would just be cruel and unusual, right? So we're going to go ahead and mix up some epoxy. I mix up 30 mLs of Artist Cure epoxy here. And we're going to put our glitters in there. So we're using Gore and we're using Glass Slipper. And we're just going to fill in those sections here. So I'm going to start with Gore in the center. And I'm just going to fill in that middle circle center. And just kind of take my time and spread that epoxy so that it meets that entire circle. And then we'll take Glass Slipper and we'll very carefully attempt to get that on the outer ring. Now, normally I do the outer ring first before I do the center ring, but I got ahead of myself here and ended up pouring the middle section first. And the reason why I do the outer ring first is because what tends to happen is I will accidentally end up over pouring the outer rim. And so in case some of it drips into the center, it's easier to then wipe it out, of course, with like a paper towel before I then lay that second color in there. Whereas as you see, when it falls in, when the color is already in there, then it gets a little bit difficult to try and kind of clean it out and remove it, if that makes sense. So after that has cured, that sat overnight before that was fully cured. And then we're going to go ahead and do our kind of final coat down here. So I am going to use my cute little Mizzy Doodle tags that have my business name on it. I got these from the Mizzy Doodles website, which I will link down below. They are perfect if you're someone who loves to, number one, tag your creations, but these are great for your rhinestone projects. They're great for really any of your epoxy resin projects. They are perfect because they sit and can lay flat within your epoxy, and it has that beautiful like metallic shimmer mirror coating on the front, so it really does stand out, which I love. And so I love to put these on the bottom of cups when I'm doing these cute little glitter butts. I do mostly use these though when I'm working on rhinestone creations, just because I love, of course, to be able to tag those to show that they are my creations. Typically my resin cups, I will just sign the bottom, but because we're doing this cute little glitter butt, I felt like we should add a little tag here. So we're just going to secure that down with a little bit of UV resin. And then we are going to add a layer of UV resin over top of this to, again, kind of flatten out the surface of the bottom here. We don't necessarily want to dome this, of course, because you don't want a wobbly bottom, but there is still a bit of a gap between where those two glitter sections meet and sort of what would be the flat of the bottom of the cup. So we're just going to add a little bit of the UV resin to just help raise that up a little bit and kind of secure that tag in there a bit more. I did add a little bit of Diamond Magic into the resin there just to give it a little extra sparkle and shimmer. Of course, it's completely up to you what you choose to do with the bottom of your cups, but I do always love a way to throw in a little Diamond Magic. And so now Baddie Glitter does also sell Diamond Magic, which was formerly from Aisha Creations. They do now, Myra over at Baddie Glitter does now sell Diamond Magic. So if you don't have this as like your additive for any and all of your epoxy creations, I definitely recommend. So we're going to go ahead and torch the bottom of this, and then we will cure this for 120 seconds, get this fully secured before we go once again back to the turner to do our final coats of epoxy here. So just that to, of course, pop all those bubbles, and then we'll go ahead and cure this before we get to our final coats of epoxy. So of course, what we need to do for our final coats of epoxy is we are going to use our Flynn Sisters Artist Cure as our final coat here. And so for this process, I did want to include the process because I do often get questions about how I keep epoxy from pooling up on the, like, where the handles are. So I will tell you that my favorite handles to work with are definitely the rounded handles. The square or rectangle handles can really prove to be quite difficult because, again, because it's a flat handle, it does allow epoxy easier to sit and pool there, whereas I feel like the rounded handles, as long as you are diligent with cleaning around where the handle is attached to the cup, you definitely don't run into as many issues. But I always like to do the handle last after I've gotten all the epoxy on the cup, you know, top to bottom. I will do the handle last and just use what's already left on my gloved hand to kind of ensure that I get a smooth handle finish, and then swipe my finger around those edges to ensure that it is not pooled. So I hope that you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, of course, leave me a comment down below. Be sure to like this video, and of course, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will see you guys again in the next one. Bye!